There is a relation between spiritualism and experimental psychology. I'm here to debate this with Ana Maria Ducuța, writer and researcher. Ana, there is a relation. What is actually the connection between the two of them?
Well, some people don't know it, but experimental psychology has started with the spiritualist phenomenon. Namely, in the late 19th century, the people that were doing psychic researches about the spirit world and about spiritism, and also the mediums that were falling into trances and doing the automatic writing that was so popular at that time. All these represented the milestone for experimental psychology. As a science per se, because psychology was struggling at that time to prove that it's different from philosophy, experimental psychology started with experiments with mediums in the psychiatric and psychological laboratories of psychiatrists and psychologists alike. And what these experiments were keen on finding was how exactly does this spirit that it is assumed inhabits us is connecting to the outer world, which are the signs. And certain instruments designed by physicists and by researchers such as William Crookes and Arthur Wallace were put in place in order to understand if there is any outer force except the conscience. And then they have discovered that during these experiments that there is something more. And this something more was related to the communication of the spirit with the spirit of dead people. And this type of communication basically triggered another important discussion that was that Alfred Binet has greatly developed during his works about the power of the unconscious over the conscious world. And then experimental psychologists were forced to turn from spiritualism to experiments that did not include spiritualism because of an incredible outrage from the scientific community that was claiming they were trying to deprive psychology of its scientific dimension, whereas this was not the case, because at that time people were sending funding and they were sending money to spiritualist newspapers, and the psychologists have used the popularity of spiritualism to establish their science, which needed incredible resources such as funding and popular support. So yes, the connection between spiritualism and experimental psychology is that many of the experiments used by experimental psychologists then and nowadays relate to experiments that were put in place by spiritualists at that time.
Thank you.